What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So hopefully everyone who celebrated Thanksgiving yesterday had a great time, hung out with the family, ate a bunch of food, watched some football, but it's Friday, which means we're back to it with the gaming news, which does include a very interesting update for Nintendo with their Switch Online service with the N64 collection that could open the door to maybe some more unexpected releases. Also, we will be talking about what seems to be a more confusing update than necessary for Xbox's big Killer Instinct release, and we'll also be taking a look at the PlayStation Portal once again, as a recent discovery shows that we've actually known about the Portal for quite some time. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake, which is still an unfortunate situation because it does appear that it was essentially rebooted completely after, well, its initial showing didn't go over so well online. But at least we are getting some good news. Well, we can see this posted up over on Twitter from the Prince of Persia account that says 20 years ago, one of the most heroic tales in video games was released, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. Hard to believe it really has been 20 years since that release, back on the GameCube, the PS2, the Xbox. But then they follow up saying, as you know, the passionate team at Ubisoft Montreal is reimagining this legendary story, and we are glad to announce today that the project has passed an important internal milestone and development is progressing. We look forward to sharing more in the future. Wow, they really were concerned that we all looked at this and said it's just canceled. The fact that we're hearing about an internal milestone that is incredibly general, it could have just been, hey, okay, we can go forward with this. Maybe you were able to get certain parts of the engine correct, or different character models and features to the right point. Like, it's so general that it's basically just saying, hey, it's still not canceled, and also we want to recognize the anniversary of Sands of Time. It does seem like we're still a ways off from seeing anything else about this game, but hey, it's better than them just canceling the game outright after what we saw. Also, we did get our first gameplay for South Park Snowday, and this is one it's kind of strange because I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the gameplay is going to look like. And I say that because, as you can see some of the trailer here that was released, this from THQ Nordic, it still feels like they're showing us different camera angles than what we will see in-game, because they do kind of still describe it as like this third-person action-adventure kind of game, and you can play with 4-player co-op completely. It doesn't look like it's the highest budget game at all, but really, for these types of games of South Park, it's more about I'm sure the writing, the characters, the interactions, that sort of thing. This is still slated for 2024 on the Switch, Xbox Series XS, PlayStation 5, and PC. I don't know if people are picturing it like the old first-person shooter kind of game we had on the Nintendo 64 back in the day, but not quite. And again, the gameplay they showed here, people don't really seem necessarily sold on, so maybe they'll have another trailer that gets a bit more in depth and actually shows it from the player perspective. Oh, and here's an interesting note going forward when it comes to reporting on PlayStation Portal sales. It does appear that it's going to be reported as hardware similar to a console or the PlayStation 5, and apparently this comes from Sony. Now, it was actually tweeted out by Matt Piscatella, of course, at MPD or Circana, and the tweet was then deleted, and I think it was because he mentioned that it was Sony who had requested this, but it was posted up over on Reset Area. You can see the clip here. And it is interesting that the PlayStation Portal is going to be tracked as if it was a dedicated system, because it's not. It's completely reliant on the PS5, and it actually falls more in line with the controller, which also needs a PlayStation 5 to do its core function. So, I don't know, it does seem like Sony, if they're requesting it, is thinking, hey, we put this out there and it outsells the Xbox, we'll make the Xbox essentially 4th place in a 3-console race, which is a very weird place to be. That, of course, in terms of just hardware and consoles sold. I know there's a whole thing about subscriptions, revenue, that sort of thing, but the way Sony's viewing it, oh, when the hardware numbers come out for the MPD, it'll go like PlayStation 5, Switch, PlayStation Portal, and then Xbox. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their Nintendo Switch Online service for the Nintendo 64. We know Jet Force Gemini is coming up in December in the US, but in Japan, they will be getting it on November 30th, so here pretty soon, alongside of GoldenEye. Now, the interesting thing about both of these games for Nintendo is that they are rated, I believe, like Z or Sero Z, which means that it would be technically like mature rated in Japan, I believe. So if you look at how Nintendo rates the NSO service for the Nintendo 64, it's all considered one game, and that's why you see T for teen maybe on, I don't know, different Mario Party games or that sort of thing. It's because the entire application is rated that way. So once you throw a mature rated game in there, the whole thing's rated mature, and that actually brings up some problems in Japan, which is why they're making an entire other section, an adults only section. This we can see posted up over on VGC, saying Nintendo is releasing an adults only N64 Switch app in Japan. It will be considered 18 plus and will have both GoldenEye and Jet Force Gemini in there. And here's a little screenshot of it, and it's sort of funny to think this because it's like Nintendo releasing 18 plus application, maybe calling on from the old days of their hotels. I do wonder if this is in place, maybe thinking of the future as well. So while they figured it out in Japan, could they do something like this just worldwide? Because there are mature rated N64 games that I'm sure Nintendo doesn't want to group together with their Marios and their Donkey Kongs, which actually we're still waiting for Donkey Kong 64. But you get the idea, all of their stuff that's like E-rated, E10 plus. Very rarely do they end up in the teen category. But then you take something like Conker's Bad Fur Day, serious mature rating, and put it next to Yoshi's Story, and it's like, oh, okay, hold on a minute. So is it possible that Nintendo does something similar here and just rates that application as mature, and they can do the whole thing where they set it up with parental guidelines if you want, and you can block that off as a parent? I mean, maybe, and then you would have a bunch of M-rated games for the Nintendo 64, maybe different Turok games. That'd be interesting. South Park, have that first-person snowball shooting game thrown in there. I know people were calling for Conker's Bad Fur Day as a big one, but also, could this be a strategy that they use maybe going into the future, where, of course, people still looking down the line to things like the GameCube, that's a possibility, and there's actually some pretty good mature-rated games there, too. Things like Eternal Darkness that could find its way into the 18-plus application. It's just an interesting strategy to see from Nintendo to figure this whole thing out, and I do wonder if this is something we will see outside of Japan, or if it's them realizing, oh, we do want to get both of these games on the Nintendo 64 app, but just based on regulations we have to follow, we have to make this 18 plus app, but it's only going to be for the Japanese region. I guess we'll see going forward, but I hope we could see something like a Conker's Bad Fur Day dropped into the service one way or the other, because it'd be a lot of fun to go back to that with kind of the cleaned up visuals and other things they've been able to do with the Nintendo 64 application. Next up, let's talk about Killer Instinct, which was a game from the Xbox One's launch, actually a pretty fun fighting game, and while I'm not as into fighting games as other people, it did seem to have a pretty serious following to it, to the point where people were nudging Microsoft constantly over the last couple of years to get some sort of Killer Instinct revival, whether it's a full-on sequel, a remaster, remake, something. Well, it does appear Iron Galaxy is coming back, and they're doing a large patch, as well as an anniversary edition. So they did a live stream the other day and sort of went over this, and it was way more confusing, I feel like, than it had to be, and that's because they're working within the bounds of, like, they had multiple seasons, different characters were sort of spread out. It was kind of a mess looking back on it now if you want to get into Killer Instinct, but they have this nice little graphic here going over everything, and really it boils down to, if you have Killer Instinct Definitive Edition, so if you had purchased it over the last couple of years or something, which, by the way, it is marked down, I believe, to like $13, that will just upgrade free of charge. So you will then just jump right up to Killer Instinct Anniversary Edition, has all the different characters in there. They're eliminating any of like the single purchase characters, that sort of, it's all just in one bundle to make it a lot easier. They will have a base free-to-play version, and what's going to happen there is they'll have a set amount of characters that are just their baseline characters, and then they will take other characters and sort of rotate them in, I believe, weekly. That way they can kind of keep the player base up, because it's something that will also be available on Steam, and as you know, with fighting games, you gotta try to at least keep the overall population for the game somewhat high just to keep matches rolling online. Now, the one sticking point is that Killer Instinct Classic 1 and 2 will not follow up with that Anniversary Edition. So if you already have the Definitive Edition, you can download those separately, but because they're rated mature and they're trying to keep this whole thing teen rated, they're separating it, which hey, we just talked about Nintendo kind of doing that with their N64 stuff. So here you go, Microsoft and Iron Galaxy trying to work through this as well. Now, if you just want to buy Anniversary Edition after it comes out, which we're still waiting for the release date and everything else that goes into that, it's going to be $29.99. And then according to Windows Central, the Game Pass version, or the Game Pass edition for Killer Instinct, that will also see an upgrade to the Anniversary Edition free of charge, as it's just part of that subscription. They also released patch notes and balancing for all different kinds of characters, and it is quite lengthy, so I will leave a link down below if you want to go through each different character, but it does look like they are doing a sizable overhaul to the game, and barring just making an entirely new Killer Instinct, this is kind of the best case scenario for everyone involved. It brings Iron Galaxy back, it gets Microsoft really a fighting game that they can get behind, even though, again, it's been there since the launch of the Xbox One. They kind of forgot about it, and it's just, there are a lot of things going on with the studios that had worked on that before, whether it was Iron Galaxy or Double Helix now with Amazon, and then there was a whole thing that happened there as well. So at this point, at least we do see some movement for Killer Instinct, and for the community, they do seem very, very excited about it. So now we just have to hang out and wait for that release date, which hopefully will be coming up pretty soon. Next up, let's talk about the PlayStation Portal, which of course is out now, so we know all about it at this time, but say back in 2017, there was a patent that people went back to now and realized, oh, this is something Sony's been working on for a long time now. In fact, based on, we can see this post here over on NeoGAF that people started to remember and then pass around. It was filed back in 2015, and if you take a look at it, at the time, it sort of appears that Sony was playing around with this idea with a DualShock 4, as that's sort of the button layout, it looks like, really the shape of the controller on either side, but it still has that same setup where it looks like the analog sticks were starting to sort of overtake the screen, if you will. This is a much more, I would say, simplistic tablet from back then, which the larger bezels and stuff, technology has actually come a bit further now when it comes to thinning out those bezels and even having the analog sticks go over the screen. But yeah, this was the PlayStation Portal that Sony had filed back in 2015, and then it was published in 2017, which we talk about patents here and there, right? Where we go, okay, this is an idea they had, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is coming to market. In this case, it is an idea they had, and it did come to market. So it's still fun to look at patents from time to time, because you never know when something like this will pop up. Now, I do wonder if they had the idea of remote play at that time, but they weren't taking remote play or streaming as seriously as they seem to be now, and maybe they pivoted and said, oh yeah, we had that patent on the remote play device, let's take another look at it and maybe use DualSense controllers instead, and the haptics and the adaptive triggers, and here we are now with the PlayStation Portal. But hey, you never know with some of these patents, so it's still fun and probably worth looking into them from time to time. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts, which from this past week will show us debut sales for Persona 5 Tactica, Hogwarts Legacy on the Switch, as well as Super Mario RPG. So let's start here with the top 10, and we can see we have Momotaro Densetsu World at the top, 314,699, just pushing around Super Mario RPG. Gotta get out of Momotaro's way, which, hey, Super Mario RPG is still there at number 2, 301,000 copies, which is, that's pretty good, I'd say, overall for Mario RPG. And Super Mario Bros. Wonder coming in at 50,545, pushing it over the 1 million mark. This, of course, all physical copies in Japan. Then we have Hogwarts Legacy on the Switch, 47,717. Persona 5 Tactica, of course, is split between between the PS5 and the Switch. 26,000 copies on the Switch, 15,000 on the PS5. People looking at this as it kind of bombing in terms of its debut week. Although after playing some of Tactica, I don't think there was a massive budget put behind this game is what I'll say. But I do think we are seeing the signs of just Persona 5 fatigue. I feel like a lot of people are just ready for Persona 6 to get unveiled, and I feel like we're going to look towards maybe the second half of 2024 for that one, so we'll see with that. Like a Dragon Gaiden there at 7, then WarioWare Move It, Naruto X Boruto at 9, and then Like a Dragon Gaiden on the PS5 rounding out the top 10. Moving to the hardware, the Switch is back at the top, 65,555, with the PS5 still behind it pretty closely at 62,912. Of course, this down from its much larger 107,000 unit the week before, but that was because the slim PS5 broke onto the scene there in Japan. Still though, those are pretty good sales, I'd say, for the PS5 rolling along into the holidays here. Then we have the Xbox Series, 3,126, PS4 at 646, and then another 22 3DS systems are found in the back. But overall, pretty good week for Momotaro, yes, and Super Mario RPG, with the question marks really being around Persona 5 Tactica, although again, I think based on what I've seen of it and played, the modest budget, I feel like Atlas and Sega would be pretty happy to sell maybe 1 million copies total of it. In that instance, they'd say, okay, we got our money back and then some. But again, all eyes, I think now are just on Persona 6. But Super Mario RPG, off to a fast start here. I think that's going to be another big number from Nintendo when they're ready to talk about this next year with investors. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, which was Game of the Year Madness Day 6. And you can see it had Hi-Fi Rush going up against Forza Motorsport. And yeah, Hi-Fi Rush absolutely wrecked Forza. Kind of what I expected here. But that means Hi-Fi Rush moving on, and it seems like the showdown set up for F-Zero 99 versus Hi-Fi Rush. How far will F-Zero 99 go? That's the big question mark for this entire thing. Will the community be able to meme F-Zero 99 past Hi-Fi Rush, past The Legend of Zelda, past Baldur's Gate 3? Tune in a couple of weeks from now to find out. But we do have another poll going up, actually a couple of hours from this video going live at 11 a.m. Eastern, so make sure you check it out, get your vote in. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Kev, who says, regarding the Switch successor DLSS story, is it possible that any potential DLA or deep learning accelerator would be on the dock instead of the console itself? After all, the Switch's screen probably won't be anything beyond 1080p at most, might not even go beyond 720p, so there might just not be a point doing it unless the console is docked. I don't know if there's a huge reason to go beyond 720p still. Like, I don't really look at my Switch's screen and go, oh, this is just too low resolution. I feel like they could probably get away with that. I mean, the Steam Deck is, what, 800p, and that's fine for me as well. But when it comes to the dock, this was the same speculation we went through with the Switch's initial launch. Is there something inside that dock that makes all of this work? And it turns out, not really, no. I mean, it can feed power to the Switch, so it can boost its clock speeds, basically eliminate the battery and keeping that in mind, right, for how fast you're running the system. And it gives video out, sure. I guess it's possible, but I'm still gonna lean to the side of everything will be in the tablet portion of it, quote unquote, and the dock will just help to speed it up with a power source and video out. But it would be interesting if NVIDIA and Nintendo kind of played around with that idea and realized, oh wow, the chip we have here, definitely strong enough for handheld mode. No problem, we don't really need DLSS in handheld mode. But when we dock it, that's when we want to tap into it, and because of that, we'll build it into the dock that might be a bit more expensive than people realize then, we'll see. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was Nintendo in their 18+ section for the Nintendo 64 application. Do you think this could maybe bring about some reveals for some other big mature rated games? And then also, what about the PlayStation Portal actually being spotted as a patent almost a decade ago? And then, of course, Killer Instinct. How many people out there are excited to see this big anniversary edition come to market? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.